welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Genius Scan and Jam. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing really well. We are going to talk today about Obsidian because it's been a while since you and I talked about this app. I think it's remarkable that Obsidian has stuck and gotten its claws as deep as it has into both of us. And it's a testament, I think, to both its flexibility and its power, because you can really do a lot with this. And I think it fits a lot of different use cases, not just the kind of work that we do, but obviously a lot of people are using it for a lot of different things. And we thought we would share some of our setups, because they do change, they do evolve over time. It's also one of the things I love about this app is that this app is not the same app I was using 2 years ago. It's really become something different because I've discovered new plugins, new themes, and I've really kind of made it my own.
Yeah. So in the pre-show for App Stories Plus members, we had, I think, a really good conversation about the meaning of note-taking and sort of my issues, my problems with retaining information and building up a digital archive of my memory. And I think it was a very good conversation. And you had some suggestions for me that I'm going to try and implement in the near future. But before we get to, obviously we are going to share our plugins, sort of like how we're using Obsidian. Before we get to that, I want to have a quick conversation with you, John, about like our system for organizing Obsidian.
Okay.
What is your Obsidian structure?
So the structure for me, I've talked about it a little bit in the past. It's like loosely designed after this Johnny Decimal system, which is a way of adding numbers essentially as prefixes to folders in order to kind of force the ordering of those folders when you're looking for something. And I find that really useful, but I don't go kind of to the nth degree on this. I use it loosely and I say that because it's like I have a couple of levels deep of that, but I don't go much deeper than those couple of levels. But what I do in general is I have areas of my life, whether it's MacStory. It's loosely divided into like MacStories, the club, podcasts, MacStories Inc., which is just like businessy stuff, and then personal. And so I've got all these different sections, and beneath each of those, I tend to have another set of folders which divide things into projects, or a little more precisely than that. And then after that, it kind of gets into the notes. And to kind of keep all this straight and keep an eye on what's going on, I use a plugin, which we'll get to and talk about in a little bit, called Iconize, which gives you some nice little icons for your...
Oh, nice. I'm also using that.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it. And what I do, then is as I create new documents, I don't worry about doing all this folder system every single moment of the day. Like, because, sometimes I'm in a hurry and I've got things to do. So I just create a new document. And because I've got this organized alphabetically, the new documents just end up kind of at the bottom of the list beneath the folders. And then when I have time, I can go through and I will delete a bunch of those. And then I will move other ones into the folders themselves. But that's kind of how it works. I try to delete things liberally. Right now, I have quite a few unorganized notes in my Obsidian, unfortunately, because I've just been busy and haven't really gotten to them yet. But I'll get there.
All right. I have a pretty simple system that I also described in the pre-show, but essentially I tend to spend most of my time in the root folder of my Obsidian Vault. My Obsidian Vault I keep in my local storage on all my Apple devices, and I use Obsidian Sync to sync it. I don't use iCloud Drive because I don't trust it. The documents that I'm working on are in the root folder of my Obsidian Vault, and then I have an archive folder for club stuff and MacStories articles. That's where I move articles when I'm done with them, and I have a couple of folders for other like reference material that I collected over the years, and I have my templates folder, obviously, and I'm gonna share my template system for Obsidian in MacStories Weekly. So that's what I've been working on this week as well, with a bunch of shortcuts that I'm using. But yeah, that's my system, and I primarily use Obsidian as a text editor.
Right.
And I've learned to embrace that. This is also what I'm going to detail in MacStories Weekly, but I've learned to embrace properties and metadata to organize my my documents, and mostly to use that metadata to integrate Obsidian with things. So that's something that I've started doing a few weeks ago, and I will share the shortcuts and the templates to do all of this with club members.
Very nice. Yeah, I actually have to go back. I'm a little behind in the sense that I want to incorporate some of the stuff that you've been doing for club members, and I haven't done that yet. But that is going to become part of my system, where I've integrated a little bit better than I am today with things. Although I do have some of the stuff we do for the club already integrated with things, but I think I can go a little bit deeper. I think I should. I've got a question for you, and I want to mention one other thing. And the one other thing is that I'm using 2 vaults now, which I've never done before. I have a separate vault for Club MacStories because we share those drafts with the other writers on the MacStories team through GitHub. And what I decided I would do, I'd always use IA Writer for this, where I would connect it with my GitHub repo folder, and I would sync up the repo, and then I would go through IA Writer and just go through all the club documents when we were putting together the newsletters. And with this now, though, because not only do we have the club, but we also have writers putting drafts in their own repos, I can point the vault at that GitHub folder and have everybody's repos all in a single Obsidian vault. Use GitHub desktop or whatever it happens to be, just to sync those files locally to my Mac, and then, or iOS for that matter, and then go through Obsidian and edit those documents that way. And I've really liked it because it's something that I'm already doing. I'm already in Obsidian all day for my own personal stuff, and now when I've got someone else's work to look at, I can do it all in the same place. But I open it, because the way the vaults work, I open it up separately in a separate window and actually gave it a different look. So I know I'm working on other people's things other than my own.
That's very cool.
Let me ask you my question.
Yes.
How many documents do you have in Obsidian right now? Your main vault.
How can I find out about this?
Oh, do you not? This, I think it's a plugin.
You can just hover over stuff. So I have 614 files in 28 folders.
Okay, I have 781 in 131 folders. So we're not that far off from each other. I thought, I wasn't sure. It sounded like you had a lot fewer based on what you were saying during the pre-show, but we have a similar number.
But I do keep an archive of every single article. And by article, I mean, like, for example, every club section, like every MacStories Weekly section, for example.
Why are you doing that?
I just like to have an archive of my articles. I've always done this.
But they're published somewhere, right? You can go get them if you want
to. They are. But like every once in a while, like I need to update something. And I always update articles from the source. I don't update them.
Interesting. Because I don't do that. And as a result, if I were to save them, they're not necessarily the canonical version of what I published either. All right. Well, I get it. I mean, I understand wanting to do that, and I did it for a long time. And now I just delete anything that's published somewhere, and it saved me. Still, I have over 700 files, but I do delete a lot. It's just that I create a lot too.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I need to rethink at some of these things. But yeah, well,
you don't use multiple vaults, do you?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. Just everything in a single vault.
This week's episode of App Stories is brought to you by Genius Scan. Genius Scan is just like having a document scanner, but in your pocket. Have you ever had to scan a document while you're away from home? Well, Genius Scan can do that for you. Place any document in front of your device's camera, and Genius Scan automatically recognizes the paper against the background. Then it crops and cleans up the result. You obtain a crisp, legible PDF every time. Regularly featured by Apple, more than 1 million people have rated the App Store at 4.9 out of 5 stars. Genius Scan has also been continuously updated since it was released in 2010. Just recently, it added improved edge detection, added curvature correction when you're scanning a book, and brand new features that will automatically detect documents in your photo library, making it really easy for you to clean them up. And by the way, all of these features rely on neural networks, and they have for a really long time. They're not just claiming that they use AI because it's the popular thing to do these days. Genius Scan puts privacy first. It no longer uses third-party ads. It dropped Google Analytics and Firebase Analytics, and it invested in paid solutions that are fully GDPR compliant, like Telemetry Deck and Sentry. Lots and lots of different kinds of people use Genius Scan too, whether they're trying to go paperless or they need an ad hoc scanning solution. Whether they're students taking notes, doctors scanning prescriptions, pilots scanning airplane documentation, truckers scanning paperwork, salespeople scanning contracts on the go, you name it, they all use Genius Scan. And that's because it's useful for both personal and professional users. And with its 2003 focus on SBOs, with the expense reporting feature, it can automatically detect the content of your receipts so that you can generate expense reports. Plus, it's a great organizational tool to keep all those documents where you can find them again. Genius Scan is free for the basic version and is fully functional and won't nag you every time you open the app. You can unlock additional features such as text recognition, automated cloud backups, auto export to your favorite cloud services, smart document renaming, receipts and business card scanning, Face ID, and more with a $39.99 per year subscription or $4.99 per month. Just go to geniusscan.com to learn more about this terrific scanning app. Again, that's geniusscan.com. Our thanks to Genius Scan for their support of the show.
All right, so I want to talk about some of the plugins that I'm using. Actually, first, I want to talk about the theme that I'm using. It's called Border. I started using this instead of Minimal Theme a couple of months ago, actually, and I really like the look of the Border theme. It's got this nice visual separation between the sidebar with the documents and the text editor and the other sort of UI around it. I really like the look. It's super clean. And then I'm using a custom font as well. I'm using a monospaced font called Mona Lisa. Just a funny name. I believe I found this font thanks to Matt Birchler, who shared it a few weeks ago, and I instantly purchased it because I love the look. And so I've been using Mona Lisa with the border theme, and yeah, that's what my Obsidian looks like. I'm only struggling at the moment because I cannot figure out how to install custom themes on Vision OS, custom fonts on Vision OS. There are font apps on Vision OS. I did go through the installation process with any font and my font files on the Vision Pro. I successfully installed a font profile in settings, but the font is not showing up in any font picker, which is weird.
There's a plugin for you for that, I think.
Tell me about this plugin.
The plugin is Custom Font Loader.
Custom font loader.
All right.
Why do I need? It lets you manually sideload fonts.
Yeah.
It
puts them in. I think it must be putting them in the CSS as like I don't know. Maybe it's base 64. There are a lot of methods for putting custom fonts into Obsidian that don't require you to deal with the OS. And the reason I found this and started using it is because I've been putting Obsidian on Android and Windows. I'm just like all over the place with Obsidian these days. And that's one of the frustrations I have, is that I will say that one of the most frustrating things about Obsidian is the setup, because it's so granular, especially when you're using Obsidian Sync, that it's very easy. It's very hard to know exactly what you should be syncing where, because I have ended up with things like an e-ink tablet syncing an e-ink theme back to my Mac where it looks absolutely terrible. And you have to just be careful to turn off syncing of certain things on certain devices to avoid them propagating to everything, which in terms of my look of my Obsidian, I like minimal. I've been testing Border. And one of the things that's kept me up from completely moving to Border for the time being It's just the time it will take me to make sure that I get everything right on every device, because part of it is I'm very picky about the colors for the H1, 2, and 3, and 4. And so I want that everywhere. And I know you can sync that, but then you have to be, I've gotten it all mixed up a bunch of times. So I don't know. I want the colors and everything to be just right. And I haven't taken the time to do it and make sure methodically that I've got it right everywhere without screwing it up on one device. I've got it really nice on my laptop right now, but I don't have it on my desktop, and I need to give it a shot there too. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Jam. If you're a web developer and you work on a team, you know that sometimes your teammates send you bug reports with very little context. Like maybe it's just a text description with no screenshot, or no console logs or user IDs. And instead of fixing it, you have to go to the person and make a ticket and hunt them down for the right information. Or you go back and forth for weeks in the ticket comments to find out whether it was a local storage API, the response to a network request, cookies at the time zones, or whatever it happens to be. And it ends up being really frustrating trying to figure out what went wrong. You might have heard of Jam. It's used by over 90,000 people, and that's because it's a free tool that saves web developers and designers a ton of time and frustration. It ensures that your teammates make perfect bug reports every time. They literally can't do it wrong. It automatically includes a video of the bug, console logs, network requests, all the information you need to debug, even things like your internet speed. Plus, it automatically lists the steps to reproduce the bug. It's also really easy to get your teammates to use because it's just a Chrome extension. When they see a bug, they just click a button and right away it creates a ticket in your issue tracker. So it saves them a lot of time, and it saves you having to hop on calls and meetings just for debugging purposes. If you're a web developer and you would rather spend your time writing code than responding to comments in your issue tracker, send your team to jam.dev. That's jam.dev, or click on the link in the show notes. Our thanks to Jam for their support of the show.
I want to cheat by mentioning some of the plugins that we made, but I mean, I am literally using them myself in my work. So
yes,
obviously the first one is Obsidian Shortcut Launcher. This got a big update a couple of weeks ago. This is a shortcut that lets you run this is a plugin that lets you run a shortcut in the Apple Shortcuts app, and allows you to send input data from Obsidian to shortcuts. So things like the title of the document you're working on, or the body text, or the selection, or the properties of the document. And this plugin is really cool to use on macOS, because on macOS it can run any shortcut directly without opening the Shortcuts app. That's only possible on macOS. On iOS and iPadOS, you can use Obsidian Shortcut Launcher, but it'll take you to the Shortcuts app, because that's the only way that you can run a shortcut on those platforms, is to actually open the Shortcuts app first. I also use a lot, these are plugins that your son, Finn, made, John. The Obsidian Markdown Insert plugin, which is a plugin for club members. This is the one I use to insert Markdown links in my stories. So I can just copy a link from Safari, press a hotkey in Obsidian, and it inserts Markdown links the way I like them. I'm using Backlinker. This is another plugin that we released last year, I believe, and allows you to define rules for opening backlinks to the current document in background tabs. And this is something that I really used for my iOS and iPadOS 17 review, to open all the reference notes in separate tabs, but only if they matched specific criteria.
Nice.
I also use Export Markdown with Embeds. This is another plugin that I use for my longer stories, like the iOS review, to compile multi-document stories into a single draft. It's very advanced. You can look up the instructions in the original post. And I also love the image inserter plugin. This is one that lets you insert any image from the clipboard, or by using a native photo speaker or file speaker. I gotta say, your son, man, he knows how to make plugins.
Yeah, he does. And they really have come in handy, because one of the things when I was talking a little bit about my GitHub vault that I use with Obsidian is that when you start a new vault, it's like a blank slate. You have to set it up separately from your main vault, which I realize how much I rely on things like Markdown Insert and, all these different ones that we've come to rely on for the work that we do at MacStories. I want to, I guess, start with one of the more complicated setups that I have that I've been using a lot, which is a plugin called DB Folder, which works with Data View. And the best way to describe this plugin is that it works an awful lot like Notion. And Notion's very good at certain things, and one of them is databases, and that's essentially what this creates. But it's a database that's based on text files. So what you do is if you can imagine something that can look a lot like a spreadsheet, it has columns and rows, and then you can track information in it. And for me, what I do is I have a DB folder database for tracking the sponsors for MacStories, whether it's the website or the podcast or whatever. And so what that means is every single one of these sponsorships is a separate note. And that note then feeds various properties from the note into the database itself. And then because it's still a note, it still has room beneath that for more information. So I can create a template and say, all right, here's like a recurring sponsor, and here's the sponsor read, for instance. And I can then start in this spreadsheet-like view, just click on a link within it, and I'm taken right into all the information I need for that particular ad read. And it allows me that way to also do things like track whether something's been paid and all that kind of stuff. There are other views that you can do with this. I primarily stick to this kind of spreadsheet view, but it works a lot like Notion that way. And one of the things that I like about it is that I can combine it with another plugin called Calendar, which just puts a calendar in your right sidebar. That calendar plugin can be used with things like daily notes, but all I use it for is as a visual calendar, so that if I'm working in something that's scheduling out our year down the road, I can flip between these different dates and see, how many weeks there are in a month, and I don't know, just have a calendar close by without having to have a separate app open, which, this is like one of the places that I spend a fair amount of time. And, when I say I have like 700 and some notes, this particular database has like 83 files in it right now because, there are a lot of weeks in the year and there are a lot of podcasts and other things going on at MacStories. So this has really made a big difference in helping keep me organized as I deal with this stuff week to week.
DB folder.
Yep, DB folder.
Interesting. I want to mention Iconize that you previously also mentioned. This is a plugin that lets you add icons to your documents. So to really anything in Obsidian, but I mostly used to add little visual indicators to documents in the sidebar. By default, the plugin lets you use emoji, which is what I use, but you can also install either manually or from a recommended list within the app, additional icon packs.
Yep,
so if you want to have
what I do.
Different, I use emoji because I'm a simpleton like that. But you can use icon packs. I primarily just do it because I want to have a clean visual separation between MacStories, as in MacStories.net articles versus club articles.
Okay.
So all MacStories articles, they get a red dot, just like the color of the site logo, and club content gets a golden star. So that's pretty easy to tell at a glance. So is this club stuff or MacStories stuff? And then everything that I'm still thinking about or researching gets the light bulb icon.
Okay.
So that's still in the idea/research stage.
Mm-hmm.
These emoji also match the projects that I have in things that also have the same emoji. MacStories has the red dot and the club as the golden star. So having consistency between Obsidian and things is something that I really value. And I like all the options that you have with Iconize. Maybe I should play around with additional icon packs, but then they wouldn't match what I have in things.
That is true. That is true. I want to just interrupt for a second because I use this plugin a little differently. I use it only for folders and only my most top level folders. So I'm only using 8 of these. So I am using some of the ones that you can pull into the app, the recommended ones. And I have things like a bookmark for MacStories, believe it or not. And I have a microphone for podcasts, but they're monochrome icons that just sit off there to the side. But I don't use iconography in things, but I do have this kind of like top level structure very much replicated in things as well. So that if I'm looking for something in things, it's going to be in a similar place to where it is in Obsidian too.
Nice. And I should also mention for Iconize, you can define rules that automatically apply specific icons based on a keyword in the file name. And I also noticed that you can integrate Iconize with the file properties. So I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to see if I can have icons defined in the templates that I already use for MacStories articles and club content.
Very nice. I like that. Okay, so speaking of properties, Federico, I'm using a plugin called Editor Syntax Highlighting, which works with code blocks to highlight code, but it also works with the YAML. So if I have my properties at the top of a document open and not collapsed, it gives them just some nice color. So it visually separates the key and value pairs.
Yeah.
So I'll have like, I'm not entirely satisfied with the way I'm using properties right now, but it does give me a nice way of kind of telling one from the other. And then it uses colors for certain things like true and false. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Nice. Let me mention a few quick ones. Footnote shortcut. This is a very simple plugin that I've been using for a while. It enters the syntax for a markdown, multi-markdown, I guess, footnote that is square bracket with
that's good. I don't have that one.
What's it called? Like the caret? What's it called?
I think so. I think that's a caret.
Yeah. And it puts the cursor right next to the caret, so you can type your footnote indicator name, and then you can write your footnote elsewhere. Now, I gotta say, I used to have a better workflow for footnotes in editorial like a decade ago. I'm still on the lookout for a plugin that replicates the workflow that I had back in the day in editorial. Like I used to have this really nice automation in editorial that prompted me for a footnote name, and then it took care of pasting, inserting in the document the footnote anchor, then scrolling at the end of the document, letting me write the footnote, and then scrolling back up to where I was in the body text. That was so nice. I was very proud of it because I did it myself, and I still haven't found anything that replicates that experience. I want to mention Settings Search. This is another plugin that lets you, search settings. There's a ton of settings in Obsidian, and this plugin lets you search those settings by name or by keyword.
I used to use that, and I saw a lot of errors in the developer panel, so I dropped it because of that, although maybe it's been updated since then. I had a lot of issues with having too many plugins that were conflicting with each other for a while, and so I paired them back, and that was one of the ones that was causing trouble, but that doesn't mean it would do so today.
I've been using a plugin called Home Tab.
That's a good one too.
I didn't like the experience in Obsidian, like the default experience for opening a new tab when I press Command T. It was like an empty tab with like either an empty file or just nothing. And so Home Tab, it presents you with this very simple page that shows you a search box and your 4 or 5 most recently opened files. That's it. So when when I press Command T, the search field is already in focus, so I can start typing. And when I type, it just searches my Obsidian Vault for any document, and I can press Enter to instantly open that document. Or if a recent document is already shown below the search box, I can just go there with the mouse and click it to open it.
Yep. And you can customize how many recents are shown in that plugin.
Nice.
And you can, and you can, I think that there are multiple search things you can do. Like the searching functionality, you can connect it with OmniSearch, which is the search plugin that I'm using, or you can use the built-in system search.
Yeah, you can even customize the logo that is shown.
True. You can put a little MacStories one on there.
You can put your face. I could put John's face.
Yeah, you could. You should. You probably should.
For whatever reason. Then obviously Templater.
Yes.
These I'm gonna cover in MacStories Weekly. This is the template system for Obsidian. John turned me onto Templater, and it's so well done. Like, you define your rules and you save your templates in a folder, and then you can go crazy with what you can automate.
Yeah.
So now I have a system that generates templates for MacStories Weekly posts, for example, all with the right properties, all with the right names. It's very nicely done. I love the system.
I have a lot of templates, Federico.
Yeah. And I've been triggering these templates using Actions for Obsidian, which is a companion app for macOS and other Apple platforms that I want to learn how to use more. It also comes with a companion companion plugin called Actions URI. But basically, Actions is... It doesn't do anything that you couldn't do if you knew what you were doing with DataView or the Obsidian URL schemes, but it simplifies a lot of those operations with native visual shortcuts actions. So it's like, it is the ultimate companion for shortcuts if you are a heavy Obsidian user. And like, you could do a lot of these things with manual URL schemes, but this is so much nicer. Like, I can trigger templates, I can append text, prepend text. You can do all sorts of things in shortcuts. And this is what I'm going to share in MacStories Weekly. Just a tiny fraction of what you can do with a combination of Templater and Actions for Obsidian.
Very nice. Well, I'm going to stick up in the top of a document with the properties and mention 2 things. One is update modified date. And this is a plugin that whenever you modify a document, it will reinsert the current date and time into your properties. And you might wonder, why would you want to do that? And the reason is that you might want to sort by that. You might want to be able to find exactly when that thing was last modified. And I can't say that I've found myself needing that a lot, but it is possible for systems to change your creation date sometimes when you're messing around in the Finder, or, there are other ways to kind of mess up those dates. But this allows me to kind of record when I last changed a document very easily, and then I can build rules off of that to only see certain documents in data view or something along those lines. So I know exactly what is both, for instance, like a working file and maybe worked on this past week. So that's what I've been using that particular plugin for that. And then, like you, I've been using Templater, and one of my templates, I have a lot of them for things that I do that are similar week to week, but I have a base template for every document I open, which has a set of properties that are set to default settings, and it moves my cursor using the syntax for Templater beneath the YAML, so that when I start a new document, I'm ready to start typing. I don't have to move the cursor down below the properties, which is pretty nice.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. What else can I mention? Let's see. Oh yeah, I have one final plugin that I want to mention. This one is called Commander, and it lets you place buttons like icons for any Obsidian command anywhere in the UI. I've been mostly using this one to either open specific files or run specific commands from the Obsidian toolbar at the top or the ribbon at the very top next to the tabs. And just like Commander has plenty of settings that lets you place any command from the command palette basically anywhere in the Obsidian UI, except in the text editor, because I mean, obviously, the text editor is where you're actually typing. But yeah, this one has been around for a while, and I recommend it. Commander.
All right. Well, I have just a trio of small ones to mention before we close things out. One is Hotkeys++, and I use this really just for one thing, which is it has a function that allows me to toggle between bullets in a bulleted list, checkboxes, and completed checkboxes. So I can just, with a keyboard shortcut, go between those very quickly. Another one is called natural language dates. So I can start typing at today, at symbol and today, and it'll drop today's date in, or at tomorrow, that kind of thing. Really handy if you're planning out a calendar or something. And then finally, plugin update tracker. This just puts a little icon down in the status bar at the bottom of the window of Obsidian that shows you whether you have an update to a plugin available and how many there are, which is just a nice little reminder to go in and update things every now and then. And I don't use it for anything other than that. I see the little red icon down there with a number in it, and I know it's time to go update something. And that, given the number of plugins I have, that's pretty much every day. But I don't get behind that way, which is kind of nice.
All right, very nice.
All right, Federico, that's quite a system. We're gonna, this is one of those things where I go through waves where I just kind of leave things alone for a while, see how it goes, and then I start exploring and seeing what's come out, in the past several months. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that I should be trying, but for now, I'm just kind of keeping my system stable because it's working for me. And I kind of feel like one of the things to me that's most important about Obsidian is getting your system down before you get too deep into the weeds with the plugins, because I think being organized and figuring out what you're using Obsidian for kind of leads you to those plugins. And if you start with the plugins, now you've just got a bunch of tools that you're not really sure what to do with. So it does kind of, I think, help to think about the system first and then ease your way into the plugins.
Yes.
And that's it for this week's episode of App Stories. Thanks again to Genius Scan for supporting this episode, and to Jam for supporting this episode. If you would like ad-free versions that are delivered early and extended, you can go to appstories.plus to subscribe to the show there, or you can join Club Premier by going to plus.club. Club Premier is our Club MacStories tier with all sorts of perks, including App Stories Plus. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. We're on Mastodon. Just go to viticci.MacStories.net and johnvorhees.MacStories.net to find us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.